Thanks for joining us for episode 3 of the Autumn Brueckmann Show. Today we'll be starting with Can a Christian, going into some random reactions, and then talking about giving students overdose kits. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. For today's first segment, we'll be answering the question, can a Christian use pronouns? Now, I hope it's clear this context, we're talking about somebody coming out and transitioning and saying that they have different pronouns. So, for example, if you have a sister and they're now wanting you to refer to them as a brother and use she, her pronouns, or if you have a male coworker who's asking you to say they, them because now they're non-binary, like what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to go along with it? Be nice and make things socially comfortable by using the pronouns that they like? No, a Christian should not be using preferred pronouns. And there's 2 reasons why. So the first thing we're going to get into is that words matter. So to build up this case, we're going to start with scripture. So I'm going to look at John 1:1. John 1 begins, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Now, if you believe this to be true, it's very clear that words are powerful. It's literally saying the Word was God. So the Word is actually a name for God himself. And if God would go by the name the Word, then words must be pretty impactful. And we see an example of this at the start of a different book of the Bible. So if we go to Genesis, it begins, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, 'Let there be lights.' And there was lights." And of course, the story of creation continues, but we see that God speaks creation into existence, showing very clearly that words are powerful, that God's using the manifestation of words to literally create into existence the entire universe. So words are meaningful, words are powerful. So if anyone says, they're just words, it's just what people say, it's just how they talk, that is not a Christian point of view. It actually is a point of view that lines up with other philosophies. So I have this book, it's just this big collection of things. It's called Western Literature in a World Context. So I was looking through this one day and was actually surprised to find this quote. This is a quote from Lao Tzu, who was an ancient philosopher from the time before Christ. So in one of his works, he says this, "Existence is beyond the power of words. To define, terms may be used, but are none of them absolute. In the beginning of heaven and earth, there were no words. Words came out of the womb of matter." And what a contrast we see there. It says the opposite of what the Bible says, right? In the beginning of heaven and earth, there were no words. Whereas the biblical narrative is that words were literally used to create the universe, and that in the beginning was the Word. So this idea that words are meaningless or not important or trivial is not a biblical worldview. In the Bible, it's very consistent that words are meaningful and powerful. So a couple more scriptures that emphasize this point are from Proverbs. So this is Proverbs 12:18. "The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." So really the power to harm someone or to help someone is in our tongue. And then we also see in Proverbs 18:21, "The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit." So we see in both of these verses really the same message, that your tongue can damage someone or heal someone, can destroy a person or make their life better. So we always should be careful with our words. Our words are very significant and they matter to God. So the next point to help us understand why a Christian should not be using preferred pronouns is that the truth matters. So when we're using a pronoun to refer to someone that doesn't match with who they actually are, we're really practicing deceit and we're lying to them. Our culture really values love. You see love all the time. We should love each other, accept each other, welcome each other. And sometimes churches want to jump on this bandwagon because obviously as Christians we also value love. But we need to recognize that the love taught about in the Bible is very different than the love that's described by our culture. So let's look at how the Bible actually talks about love. So we're going to go to a famous passage in 1 Corinthians. I'm going to start in verse 4. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. And this is really the contrast to the love that's in the world and the love that God teaches us to have. That when we love someone, we cannot delight in the evil things that they're doing, but rather we rejoice in the truth. So when someone's coming to you and they're looking for your acceptance and affirmation of their lifestyle that is against the life they're supposed to live, it is not your place to delight in that. And to do so would be against the nature of love. To love that person, you need to be willing to speak the truth. And really the truth is a beautiful message. It's that they don't need to change who they are. Because you see, the act of transgenderism is an act of destruction. In taking on a new identity, they are destroying their current identity. It's really the equivalent of suicide because they are destroying the person that they are and they're trying to become someone that they are not. It's not the act of the Bible, right? When Jesus transforms our life, he redeems us. Right? But in the act of transgenderism, there's a destruction of the person that they are. So as Christians, we want to tell people that they're made in the image of God, that their life has value and meaning, whether or not they feel like it, whether or not they feel like they're accepted by others, whether or not they feel like they fit in. That doesn't matter. That doesn't change that their life has value and purpose, and that they don't need hormone therapy, that they don't need surgery, that they don't need to be called someone that they are not in order to attain those things. And that's the loving message, is to tell them that they're already valued as they are, and they don't need those treatments, and they don't need people to change the verbiage or the way that they speak about them. That might not be the message that they want to hear. It might be an uncomfortable conversation, but acknowledging the truth and speaking openly about the truth to them is meaningful and valuable in someone's life. And your tongue, your words, could be the healing that that person needs. So this topic was a little bit heavy, so we're going to switch over now to something a little more lighthearted with random reactions. For today's random reaction, we're going to look at a few different videos that have been circulating online and just give an honest response to what to think about whatever they're talking about in the video. So let's get started with this one.
Black History Month you find
ridiculous.
Why?
You're going to relegate my history to a month?
Oh, come on.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? No, well, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
No.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism until...
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman. You're going to say, well, I know this white guy named Mike Wallace. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
So I love that video. I think that was a beautiful response from Morgan Freeman. Because I really love, there's a lot of African American figures whose stories I enjoy and I benefit from. So sometimes when we have Black History Month and it's like supposed to be this separate thing, it's like, well, I love these stories and they should just be integrated into the history that we're already talking about. Like figures like George Washington Carver, right, who's known for creating peanut oil and doing so many things with the peanut for helping his community and promoting agriculture. or people like Harriet Tubman, and these people who spoke out, against slavery, were abolitionists like Frederick Douglass. I mean, there's so many people who have inspirational stories that everybody can learn from, and everybody can benefit from these amazing people from our history. And it is all of our history, right? Our history is together. We are one nation, and it is something that we can just come together about and celebrate who we are as a people without having to be divisive.
Private equity is now doing this all over the country to franchise owners. It's kind of the last frontier for private equity of destroying small business in this country.
Correct. In the last 5 years, private equity acquisition of franchises have doubled and tripled each year, year over year. The independently owned small business owners have no way to defend themselves against these billion-dollar corporations that come in. One of the hardest things is that they're buying up these large swaths of industries in regions, right? There's a company called Champions Group right now in the Southwest is a really good example. You can look them up online. They've purchased dozens of HVAC companies that were family owned for 4 decades, 5 decades, had great reputations in their community and had large market shares in their community. 25, 30, 40 vans going out. And they bought all of them. And then they paid for the name, image, likeness of the former owners as part of the deal. And when you go to any of the websites for all of these HVAC companies, they all still say they're small businesses, locally owned and operated, things like, we serve our community because we're part of our community. But now they have unified software across all of them. And so no matter who you call for a quote on, let's say, a frozen line on your air conditioner, if the first one comes out and says $1,600, and you say, oh my gosh, that was only $400 the last time this happened. And they say, oh, COVID, supply issues, nobody's going to say greedflation, right? They say, but if you want a second opinion, call one of them, see what they say. You have no idea that they're owned by the same company, same private equity firms, and the next guy comes out and says $1,580. And you say, I don't have that kind of money. They say, don't worry, we'll finance it for you. Because they bought the finance company too. That's fine.
How many franchisees are there in the United States?
They represent millions and millions and millions of employees. People don't realize small things are franchises. Little tiny coffee carts are franchises. And it's being consolidated by these private equity firms to squeeze out any mom and pops that could compete with the franchises. So it's restricting competition, and it's setting prices across the spectrum of services, everything from home services to car services to insurance services to real estate brokerages, schools. There's one private equity firm right now that owns 37 brands of daycare centers, and the daycare costs have spiraled out of control in the United States, but they are killing it in revenue. Everybody's saying childcare is unaffordable. Their employees aren't being paid well, but those private equity firms, they are making money, lots of money. Our trust in mega corporations is something like 8 to 9%, but our trust in small businesses nationwide is between 65 and 81%. They saw that, they saw the writing on the wall, and they said, well, clearly that's what we've got to take next. We've got to convince everybody that's what we are. And they decided that they needed to invest in the things we cared about most. Because as long as we were emotionally tied to the cost, no matter how much they raised it, we would pay it. Veterinary care, children's pediatric care, daycare centers, children's services, funeral services, the things you'll pay for no matter what, that's what they turn their attention to, because you will take, and they said, even if you won't pay it, you'll take out the loan to pay it. And then they bought all the finance companies too. And here we are.
Now, I think this is an issue that we really want to pay more attention to. Historically, I think we've looked at corporations versus government, and we've thought of them as just these battling entities for power. But I think what's really happening that we need to be concerned about is the tie between them, that corporations are getting big and they're wanting to partner with government with some of these ideologies that we don't agree with. This is actually one of the reasons for including this idea in 2034, a cautionary tale. So in 1984, right, we see this big brother and, always watching you, and people don't want the government to look like that. But what we're seeing today is that the government will be using corporations as their means of getting into things. So just as an example, we saw the government and some administration's trying to partner with social media to censor certain information or to only allow certain content to be available. And so there's this link between corporate power and government power that can turn into something ugly very quickly. And I think we need to be aware of this and be thinking of ways to, make sure that the small business owners and the people just legitimately trying to have their own independent life can still maintain that livelihood and that existence. I do also think Robert Kennedy Jr., I really have valued his content. I haven't followed him super closely, but he's really brought up some meaningful conversations with the issues that he's been speaking about in his campaign. So I think he's definitely somebody to be listening to and be hearing, what he has to say about these issues. So that closes out our random reactions. And next up, we've got 2034 in the news. For 2034 in the news today, we're going to be talking about Narcan. So this article comes from the Daily Wire, and the headline reads, "All Washington public high schools to get overdose kits. Health officials cite fentanyl surge." So I'll give you a brief overview by reading a bit of the article here. In a press release on Wednesday, the Washington Department of Health announced the deployment of overdose kits as a means to combat a dramatic rise in opioid-related youth overdose deaths. And further on in the article, it talks about how this isn't just specific to Washington. It says the state of Washington follows closely behind other states enacting similar initiatives. Last month, Oregon began issuing overdose kits to both middle and high schools. Earlier this month, Arkansas put into effect a law requiring overdose kits in all public high schools and universities. WDOH acknowledged that this initiative was a direct response to a Department of Education request to all schools last October to stock up on overdose kits. The letter followed a series of reports on schools experiencing an increase in drug-related incidents, including a surge in drug overdoses in one Southeast Texas school district. So really, this article is just sad. It's sad to think of this being the state of our high schools, that there are so many places in our country where so many students are using drugs, or even in middle school. But when I first saw the headline of this article, I thought immediately of a scene from 2034. So I'm just going to read a little bit of this. So this is a conversation between two staff members at Georgiana's school. "How do you not get it? Research Tech is distributing safety medications. They make sure each student who experiments with drugs has a safety kit in case someone near them overdoses. The more students who need it, the more safety medications they distribute to the school," replied the nurse rather disdainfully. "So Research Tech wants kids to use drugs so it can sell safety kits? This is just a money grab," came an even more irate school counselor. So in the novel, there's some corruption involved in this process. But it's very similar to this idea that, we just sort of accept that students are going to be using drugs, so we have to have a response to the overdose available. And really what we want to see is a response that teaches students not to be a part of this culture, not to just say that this is normal. Like, this should not be viewed as normal. Drugs are destructive, right? People die from them, even aside from accidentally being exposed to fentanyl or not knowing what's in what they're using, right? People get addicted to substances and overuse them and die from them. Like, just the nature of drug use is destructive. It destroys people's lives. And if it doesn't destroy their lives, it will destroy their livelihoods, their ability to have meaningful relationships, to have a family structure. I mean, there's so many devastating effects, and it's not something we want students to be involved with, or that we want to normalize or make students think is okay. Now, there is a place, for Narcan. I've heard of, police using this. And of course, it's good, any opportunity you have to save someone's life. But just culturally, seeing how drug use has grown and how people talk about it, there's almost this just acceptance that it's just a normal part of life. And I think we need to understand that this is a real temptation for students in middle and high schools, especially in some of these areas where there's heavy use. And so if you have a student who's that age, and maybe you don't even think the school they're going to has this problem or is that bad. Like, you need to have these conversations. You need to talk about what's appropriate, about what's healthy, about who are good people to have friendships with. These things that can help them navigate these situations to make wise choices and to stay out of this culture, because they're going to hear a message that this is normal, that it's not a big deal, and they need someone to be that voice in their life that teaches them that this drug use is destructive and devastating. And it doesn't matter if you have an overdose kit. That's not the point. You don't want to be a part of this lifestyle at all. And so it's important that we're that voice, that we speak truth, and that we teach our youth and our young people the proper way to navigate through life. So that wraps up our 2034 in the news. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Autumn Brueckmann Show. We're glad that you were with us. Look forward to reading your comments and hearing what you have to say about these topics. And remember to live in truth.